Leslie Cornwell, certified nurse midwife with Midwifery Business Consultation. I have Deidre DeGrado, a certified professional midwife in Kansas. We got to meet a few months ago with some consulting questions, and she had an amazing midwifery team and practice layout that I really have been trying to get more midwives to replicate across the country. So Deidre, thank you for joining me today, and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Super. Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. So, as you said, yeah, my name is Deidre, and I practice in Wichita, Kansas. So, a Midwest midwife. I practice with several other midwives. There are four of us, and soon to be five. We are all CPMs, but we also have a CNM. She's a CPM, CNM as well. Yeah, and I've been in practice for almost 20 years, and I've delivered just coming up on 1,000 babies.
It's exciting. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when you called me to consult, I was like, this structure you have set up with the midwives is really awesome. I wish more communities did it. So kind of tell us what type of midwifery structure you've set up as a collaboration among each other and why it's structured the way it is.
Yeah. So when I started out, I practiced, kind of a sole practitioner, although I shared some space with the midwife that trained me, and she basically would come in and help me, and I would help her as needed. But it wasn't a very formal arrangement, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. One thing I knew very early on was that this wasn't something I wanted to do alone. And if I was going to have my practice growing, I just knew that burnout was inevitable if I didn't come up with something different than what she was doing and what some of the other midwives in town were doing. So, 20 years ago, the model was pretty different, and also the demand was much, much lower than it is nowadays, and that just keeps growing and growing. And so I'm kind of glad that it ended up working out the way that it did, because definitely I could not sustain what I'm doing and still have a family and have a social life and get any kind of sleep at all. So the student that I had at the time, she also had kind of the same goals. She has a big family. I have 8 children, or I have 9 children. She has 8 children. I better not mess that up. And so we both kind of just had the same goals in mind, and we just started kind of exploring ideas of what could work.
Yeah. Well, and I think you and we coined it as kind of the midwife co-op, because it's business entities that are separate, but they're also overlapping and resource pooling, like the supplies and what each person is an expert in. Like, I know you are running the business side for a good chunk of the ladies because they didn't want that part. So if you want to tell how you've structured this team of 5 growing to 6 midwives, where you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. So I do think what we have is really unique and really super ideal, although I don't think the model in and of itself is unique to midwifery. I think it's probably a more common model maybe in other things like, counseling models, or my husband actually is in a similar model in his chiropractic business. And I kind of got the general idea from my daughter and my husband, and we've done some things differently, but basically what happens is, I would say, like, I own, the business side of what we all do. We're all sole, independently contracted midwives. But my job for the group of midwives is to basically kind of collect all of the income and then disperse it, and we work on a percentage basis. So in other words, whatever comes in is then dispersed to the midwife for her part, and then I keep my part for managing the business. And so my part is definitely big, and it is a big responsibility, and I would say it's not the part that most midwives probably want to do. I'm not even sure I actually want to do it, but I ended up doing it. And I think like that leadership role, and also to just the ability to kind of pull people together and recognize like what does everybody need to do their job well, has been really effective for all of the midwives in our group. They're able to just be midwives. They don't do anything else really but be a midwife.
Well, it's worrying about 5 separate home birth or birth center practices making their own policies and procedures and systems, and how do we solve this challenge and problem. Now you guys can do it as a pool of 5 and learn from each other and accelerate it. And so that business thing can be a fraction of the time versus the clinical care. I think sometimes midwives, our level of collaboration across the country is typically, well, we'll just back each other up and write an agreement, and this is how much I pay you and this is how much. But there's still so much of the business side where we have to learn hard, not from each other.
Yeah, and Leslie, I think the framework that we have is good because, like, I can think of so many little things that probably most midwives may not even be thinking about. But, like you buy Rogam. I mean, it could expire before you even use all of your Rogam. That doesn't happen to us. We
Yeah, you've
share
got 5 to spread it among, I mean, you buy in bulk. If somebody's running out of something, you just trade with each other because they know they have a RH negative lady coming up. Oh my goodness. Yeah, the cost saving people don't even account for and think about.
Well, and so all of that expense is my responsibility. So I shoulder all of that. If our office needs something, I just tell the coordinator, "Hey, we need Rogam," or "Hey, we need, whatever it might be," and she just orders it, and the office is always stocked, and they just come get whatever they want whenever they want, and then they can just use it in their independent practice for serving their moms. And then we share an EHR system as well, and so that's really convenient because when I open up, mobile midwife, I can see all of the clients that are due amongst all of us. And so if one of them, like this actually just happened recently, we had, what I would call kind of like one of those big life things. I mean, alongside COVID, which I am really glad with the whole COVID thing that we had this in place. But, one of my sister midwives had her dad get really sick and pass away. And, she just kind of dropped the ball, and we were able just to pick up where she left off. We are
Well,
just
and
like,
it's vice
"Hey,
versa and supporting each other. If you got recitals, I remember vividly being at baseball games and the anxiety. Oh my goodness, I'm focusing on trying to find service so people can find me versus focusing on the moment with my kids. Like these little things that work-life balance, and knowing you've got someone to support, you can take some time off, you can fill in those needs when they unexpectedly happen in life.
Yeah, I think that is the hugest blessing of it all is that, we really, there's a lot of give and take. And yeah, there's a financial cost to that. But I think that most midwives probably do not realize like there's the financial cost anyway. So,
Yeah, you may not see it directly, or it happens, or it's so habitual into your life, you don't realize the time and the financial cost it's covering because you don't know any other way. Yeah.
yeah, it's very haphazard, and I think most midwives don't, probably even aren't aware of what their cost of doing business actually is, and then how much time they're putting in the business component.
Mhm.
I'm training a student right now, and right now she's at the front desk, and so she's learning the whole business end of owning a business. And, she said to me, we were on our way home from a postpartum visit late last night, and she said, "I think I figured out one thing." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "I don't want to own a business." I said, "Yeah, shocking. I don't blame you. I don't really either, but I am, and it's fine, and I'm doing it." So I
Well, to
think
be a
that,
successful midwife, you have to, unless you can hire somewhere. I mean, most of the jobs are in the hospital. There's birth centers, there's some practices hiring, but it's either you start it yourself or you find a co-op where there is someone that loves business and you love this part. You love marketing, you love bookkeeping, everybody can utilize each other's skills to better the community versus everybody's just doing their own thing. And now I've got 2 ladies in labor at once. Now help me. Like that's the different level of collaboration.
yeah, and that's a whole nother layer of stress. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I mean, that is something that I think most midwives, and myself included, we definitely spend a lot of time thinking about the what ifs. And
Do you guys share, like, do they see each midwife, or is it more I am their primary, but they know there's backup options in place? Like, how is the etiquette with the clients done?
yeah, so I think that's also something that appeals to most CPMs for sure. I don't know the thinking behind some of the CNM practices, but we do take our own clients. So if somebody comes in and they say, "Hey, I want Deidre for a midwife," they're going to get me for their midwife unless I'm full, and then somebody else will take them. But that's the nice thing. They are still always going to see me. But if I'm at a birth and I'm out of clinic that day, then one of the other midwives can just cover the clinic. So they do end up getting to know them. So I would say like the patient still has the choice to have the midwife that they want. So it's different from a group practice in that way, which I think is very appealing to the majority of us CPMs. Like I think we want to hold on to our clientele, and that's very important to us. And I mean, it's important to the community too.
Well, it's the best of both worlds. Like, because I think any midwife doesn't want an assembly line. They want to know their clients. They want to build a relationship. Okay, now there's 3 to 5 midwives. We're seeing 15, 20 people. How are you going to build that relationship with all of them? So you get a cushion. And I think to the clients, it's all how you present it. If you say, look, you get a fresh new face. If I'm at 2 places, you get to meet, we have similar philosophies. That should be comforting to the community that you're serving, that you've got backup plans in place. I mean, it amazes me how many clients don't ask, like, you're Superwoman, you're going to be in 5 places at once. What happens if this happens? Like, who do I get to meet those backup options?
Yeah, I think that's right, Leslie. The client often doesn't ask that question, but I think it's a question that needs asking for sure. And so when, when we meet people and we enter, into a relationship with our clientele, we tell them like, yes, I'm going to be your midwife, but this is a group practice and I want you to not just love me, I want you to love all of us. And I want you to know that my partners are going to take care of you just like they would their own, clients if something happens with me. And I think it's reasonable to think, like, especially over the last 2 years with COVID, that people really were like out of commission. I mean, we all ended up getting COVID, or our family got COVID, and we were in quarantine. And sometimes I was thinking to myself so many times during COVID, how are these solo midwives doing this? Like, we've got
They're
3 people
struggling.
out. Like, what
They're
are they
absolutely
doing?
struggling. Yeah.
Yeah, what are they
Yeah.
doing?
Well, because even just the birth centers, I think so many of the midwives, they have not as much of a collaboration and co-op support like you guys have set up, and they're just burning out. They're trying to be super women, they're trying to be super moms, super wives, super midwives, and their bodies and their minds just can't do it. I mean, I went through that burnout in 2017, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. And so I've seen those few gems, like Northern Indiana, where I did clinicals, had an amazing collaboration, a little different than what you have set up, but there are these gems all over the country, and people think of them like unicorns. Oh, you just talk, but they don't really exist. And I'm like, no, they do. We need to replicate these. And that's where I get a big advantage by talking to so many amazing midwives across the country. I get to pull from these gems and teach them to more people, because they don't know, oh, I got to talk to Deidre if you want to create a midwifery co-op. Oh, that part of the country really has it figured out. Like, how are people going to know that without talking and digging? So thank you so much, Deidre, for doing what you're doing. What other words of advice, if you have 2, 3, 4 midwives in a community that want to start this, how would they even get going from the beginning? Because I've been consulting a few people that it's just overwhelming to them. They're like, well, how do we figure out past inventory? How do we figure out salaries? How do we figure out responsibility and decision making? Like, they're just so overwhelmed of how do you merge this style and structure together.
Well, I think they can book a consultation with me.
Yep, 1, book a consultation, but 2,
Yeah.
just to, even if they're getting started early conversations, is it a good compatibility style? Kind of like dating, like that's the big joke I have, is like, you're kind of talking about engagement and the wedding planning, and
Yeah.
do you want to know certain things about that?
Yes, I think that's part of it for sure. You do have to figure out the compatibility part of it. But I don't even know, like that definitely matters because yes, you are interacting and you do want to have your model and the way that you practice, I think has to be somewhat similar. And I think CPMs by and large practice similarly anyway. But I think you definitely need to make sure that you practice similarly, you think similarly in the way that you care for your clients. That's important. But also, there's not a ton of overlap and interaction with each other. So it's not
No.
like you need to
It's
be
more the business structure philosophy. How do you run things? Do you have similar fee schedules? You gotta, if you do this screening, but the other midwife doesn't do that screening. I mean, you want to have a more consistent standard of care, even though you're
yeah.
not doing it side by side with each other. You want it to be cross referral. So then all of a sudden they see this lady at 36 weeks, and you always talk about this, but that person doesn't talk about it. You want to make sure your education flow and what you outsource to somebody else versus you do internal is very consistent. So
Yeah. So I think you need a strong leader. I think you need somebody that is, first of all, willing to shoulder the financial responsibility. And that's a big step. It really
yeah.
is. But at the same time, like it's not like you're not going to get paid to do that. I mean, I get paid to manage and run the business. And so there's an income from that. And so
Hmm.
it can be a blessing on that end. But you also really need to be able and willing to kind of be somebody that helps other people make decisions. You know, you don't want to be, somebody that is a dictator,
Right.
how it is working with women. We do need to be someone that works well with other women, and but also that you have a good, strong leadership style. I was thinking a lot about a leadership podcast, and I was mentioning this to you earlier that they said the biggest problem in business is that people are kind of unwilling. Like they want a solution, but they're really unwilling to change.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just want to tell the midwives out there that, like, if you are willing to change and you are willing to work with other women as your sister midwives, like, you could have a situation that could be so much better than the situation that you're in. And,
Right.
the services that, the business side provides for all of the midwives, it's like somebody else does their birth certificates, somebody else cleans I pay to have the office clean. I mean, organize things that need to be done in the office. The barrage of things that I facilitate on the business end is pretty enormous.
Yeah.
And I think that can be something really huge that, you can just start making a list of all of the things that you would rather have somebody else do.
Yeah.
And what are the things that you want to do yourself? Maybe you want to do the birth certificates or maybe you don't. And what are you willing to give up for what you can gain? So I think that's
Right.
where a conversation ideally would start with two people, is like, what are the things that you could be good at, and what are the things that I could be good at, and what are the things that we could find somebody else that would be good at,
Yeah.
and
We
make sure.
outsource completely. Neither one of us want to touch this with a 10-foot pole.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
But I also think you really do have to be willing to surrender some things. We do have cohesive practice guidelines, so we do, and that was something that had to change. Once we got our nurse midwife in our practice, there were definitely some things that she was like, it absolutely has to be this way. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, was that a little difficult? Sure, but in the long run, it's nothing compared to everything we're gaining. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is nothing in the big
Yeah,
picture.
I know. And that's why I think sometimes people think, oh, the nurse midwives are a little more medicalized, but I'm like, it's a give and take. We have different regulations we have to follow. We have a board of nursing. You guys have a board of midwifery. We have the same core heart, but our
Absolutely.
bosses that run our licenses are a little different philosophy. So let's compromise together. Let's figure out. I'm not a medicalized, like I hear that often, like nurse midwives are too medicalized, CPMs are too off the grid. And I'm like, you guys don't understand. We don't communicate well. It's not just us as a personal level. We're thinking malpractice, no malpractice, license, insurance, no insurance. Like there's so many layers to merging these educational pathways that sometimes makes it hard. But in the long run, if you can work out those little kinks together, it makes phenomenally stronger practices.
Oh, I totally agree with that. She had so many other skills that the rest of us did not have. And she didn't, on the flip side, she didn't know what it looks like to even
Yeah.
start a home birth practice, or what are all the little things that you need to know. She didn't have to do newborn care. She
Yep.
had no idea what was involved
Yep,
in that.
exactly. So
And
we have to
so,
learn from each other. I see heavy OB alternative skills from the CPMs, and then more the GYN, the
yeah.
primary care aspect, a little bit. Maybe you don't need a high risk obstetrician, but there's a little bit more of co-management. Like there's so much benefits if we can merge CNMs and CPMs and private practices
Definitely.
together. So yeah, Deidre, I would talk to you for on and on and on.
For
I
sure.
do want to let everybody know I've been really excited that you're going to join doing some consulting work with Midwifery Business Consultation. And so we're going to start, we're early stages. We're going to start getting her a discovery meeting on the website and start helping. But yeah, I want to refer people to Deidre that are just wanting to merge these practices, taking these community collaborations, because that's your strength. Oh my goodness. I've had a new couple ladies that I'm like, okay, Deidre, hurry up and get on the team, because you're going to be able to be way better help for them. Because I know my strengths. I'm the business, I'm the funding, the structure, the nitty gritty and the backdrops. But as far as these cohesive collaborations, you've done a phenomenal job in Kansas.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited. I feel like you have so many incredible strengths and you've got so many detailed things that people really need in practices too. So I think we're going to be a great team. I'm excited.
We're going to make great changes happen and we'll keep growing because yeah, I'm only one person and the consulting has gotten busy and I want to leverage all these great experts. So yes, Deidre is going to be available to do some consulting services and we'll get you on the website and expand you as well. So thank you so much, Deidre.
For sure.